When the West cut Russia from SWIFT, they thought they were crippling one nation, but instead, they triggered a global financial chain reaction that may have damaged the dollar forever. What was meant to be the strongest sanction in history became the moment dozens of countries realized the U.S. could weaponize money itself, and they quietly began building an escape route. For decades, the dollar dominated the world not because nations loved it, but because they had no alternative. SWIFT was the backbone of global payments, and America controlled the switch. But in 2022, when Russia was cut out instantly, every major economy watching asked the same terrifying question: if they can freeze Russia, can they freeze us too? That single moment shattered global trust and accelerated the rise of competing payment systems, non-dollar trade agreements, BRICS expansion, and gold-based settlements. The world didn't just react, they began preparing for life after the dollar, and that shift is now unstoppable. When Russia was cut off from SWIFT in 2022, most people saw it as a powerful punishment, but world leaders saw something much deeper and far more frightening. For the first time in modern history, a major global power was digitally erased from the global financial grid with a single coordinated decision. This wasn't just a sanction, it was a signal to every nation that the U.S. and its allies had the ability to shut down an entire economy overnight. Countries that once trusted the global financial system suddenly realized their access wasn't guaranteed. It was permission-based, and permission can be taken away. That fear planted a seed that is now transforming global finance. And what happened next changed the dollar's future forever. The world's reaction to Russia's SWIFT removal wasn't loud, it was silent, strategic, and immediate. Nations from Asia to the Middle East instantly began rethinking their financial dependence on the U.S., not because they supported Russia, but because they feared being the next target. Countries holding billions in U.S. reserves started wondering if those reserves could be frozen too. Governments began studying alternatives, analyzing vulnerabilities, and quietly moving pieces behind the curtain. What looked like a punishment on Russia turned into a wake-up call for the entire planet. Even U.S. allies began questioning whether a single system should have so much concentrated power. But the real shift began when these countries started acting, not just thinking. To reduce their risk, countries rushed to create and join new payment networks. China expanded its CIPS system. India started pushing its rupee-based mechanisms. The Middle East explored digital settlement platforms. Even Europe began discussing long-term independence from U.S. controlled channels. These systems weren't fully developed yet, but they didn't need to be. The goal wasn't to replace SWIFT overnight, just to ensure options existed. Reducing dependence is the first step toward escaping dominance, and that's exactly what started happening. Parallel financial structures began emerging globally, all because one historic decision shattered trust in the old one. And this shift only grew stronger when nations turned towards something even more powerful: alliances. Before SWIFT sanctions, BRICS was a discussion group. After SWIFT sanctions, BRICS became a mission. Countries eager to escape dollar dominance saw BRICS as their greatest opportunity. New members began applying. Meetings increased. Coordination accelerated. The group openly discussed a common settlement system and even a shared currency for international trade. These weren't symbolic ideas, they were survival strategies. Every time BRICS expanded, the dollar's influence shrank. The more countries that joined, the more the global balance of financial power tilted. And as this alliance grew stronger, so did its determination to create a world where the dollar was no longer king. But the most powerful blow to the dollar came from something far older than BRICS itself. As nations tried to shield themselves from sanctions, many turned back to something they trusted long before the dollar existed: gold. Central banks began hoarding gold at the fastest pace seen in decades. Others started trading oil, gas, and raw materials directly, bypassing the dollar completely. These commodity-backed deals were safer, harder to control, and immune to political pressure. What once seemed outdated became the foundation of a new financial strategy. The more gold and commodity reserves nations accumulated, the less they depended on the dollar. But even gold wasn't the only shift, because digital technology pushed the transformation further. Around the world, governments began exploring digital currencies (CBSCS) as tools to avoid dollar-based infrastructure. China's digital yuan became a major pilot program. India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and even Russia tested digital settlement rails. These systems allowed countries to trade without banks, without SWIFT, and without U.S. oversight. Digital currencies weren't just innovation, they were insurance against sanctions. And every step they took made the dollar slightly less necessary in global trade. The old financial world was slowly being replaced by something decentralized and multipolar. But the biggest risk to the dollar wasn't foreign innovation, it was America's own decisions. The goal of SWIFT sanctions was to weaken Russia, but they also weakened global trust in the U.S. financial system. The dollar's strength always came from belief in stability, neutrality, and safety. But the moment money became a weapon, belief began to fade. Nations asked themselves, why rely on a country that can instantly freeze our assets? And when belief disappears, power follows. America didn't lose its financial dominance overnight, but it planted the seeds of its decline. And what those seeds grew into is reshaping the world's future right now. Today, the dollar still leads, but it no longer leads alone. Countries have alternatives. Payment systems have multiplied. Alliances have strengthened. Gold reserves have surged. Commodity trade has shifted. And digital currencies are unlocking a parallel global economy. Cutting Russia from SWIFT didn't destroy the dollar instantly, it triggered a slow, irreversible transformation. A transformation where the world no longer depends on one currency or one country. The dollar's future isn't collapse, it's shared power, reduced dominance, and rising challengers. And to understand how this new financial era will impact your money, you need to see what happens next. In the end, the story of how cutting Russia from SWIFT reshaped global finance isn't just about sanctions or geopolitics, it's about a world waking up to the risks of depending on a single system, a single currency, and a single financial power. What happened in 2022 set off a chain reaction that no nation can fully reverse. New alliances are forming, new payment networks are rising, and the global economy is quietly shifting into a multipolar era. The dollar won't disappear, but its era of unquestioned dominance is fading. And whether this transition becomes smooth or chaotic will define the next decade of global history. That's why understanding these changes isn't optional, and it's essential for anyone who wants to stay ahead of the world's biggest financial shifts. If you want to keep learning about these hidden forces shaping our future, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and stay with us here on Money Timeline, where we decode every major moment in financial history before it becomes tomorrow's headline.